Good Monday morning to you. We are one day removed from Easter, and we're about 12 hours removed from a great scare we had in our local community relating to this storm cell that came in, or multiple storm cells that came in late yesterday evening. And it just brings up a new opportunity for fear and anxiety. So here I am sharing these devotionals with you on scriptures relating to fear and anxiety because of the coronavirus, because of the COVID-19 outbreak. But now we have so many of us were sheltered in place in our homes because of a virus, and then we sheltered further into place in our homes yesterday evening because of a great storm. And in the midst of this anxiety, it reminds me that we face anxiety based off of the strength we have of faith in God's provision because of his past provision. And so what I mean by that is that if you are really struggling to face the anxieties or fears you're facing in your life right now, perhaps it's helpful to reflect on how God has been helpful in the midst of anxiety to bring you through trials that you faced in the past. So for me, for my family, tornadoes are a huge part of that. And you've probably heard the story that when I was living in South Carolina and Jess was living in Tennessee in her senior year of college, a tornado hit her college campus where I had just graduated from and hit hard and leveled multiple dorm buildings, and including the building that she lived in. So she and many of her friends were homeless then for weeks afterwards. And as I reflect on God's provision in times of anxiety, I cannot forget about that time. So I'm going to share with you a scripture that was helpful to me in that time. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, and I'll kind of skip around a little bit in verses 7 through 18. We have this treasure in jars of clay to show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not driven to despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed, always carrying in the body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be manifested in our bodies. For we who live are always being given over to death for Jesus' sake, so that the life of Jesus may also be manifested in our mortal flesh. Death is at work in us, but life in you. So, verse 16, so we do not lose heart. Though our outer nature is wasting away, our inner nature is being renewed day by day. For this slight momentary affliction is preparing us for an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison, as we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal. That whole passage is about the fragility of this life and the eternality of us. That though we are jars of clay and though we are fragile today, though we can be afflicted, though we can be perplexed, though we can be persecuted, as God's children, though we are afflicted, we are not crushed. Though we are perplexed, we need not be driven to despair. Though we are persecuted, we are not forsaken. Though we are struck down, we are not destroyed. And I remember seeing those buildings that had fallen in that tornado that Jess was in, and recognizing that my friends, my fiance at the time, they had been afflicted. They had been afflicted, but not crushed. And as you pull up to those buildings, that the buildings had been crushed. And you would assume that the humans that were inhabiting those buildings at the time would have been crushed also. And yet they were not. They were protected by the hand of God. I'm looking around our community and recognizing that while Dalton doesn't have as significant of damage, but Murray County does, Chattanooga does, we recognize the fact that though we are afflicted with these great trials, God has provision for us in the midst of even the most difficult situations. And look at the way he ends this chapter 4 of 2 Corinthians. We do not lose heart. So that's my prayer for you today. Though the affliction of a global pandemic has then been added to by the affliction of a storm cell, now it's more important than ever before. Do not lose heart. Why? Because though our outer nature is wasting away, our inner nature is being renewed. Though our physical body is wasting away, our soul is being prepared for glory. And this slight, momentary affliction, y'all, that sounds so insensitive, but I didn't say it. Paul said it. This slight, momentary affliction that we are experiencing right now, no matter how severe it is for you right now, if it's happening in this life, Paul calls it slight and momentary. Why? Because it's not eternal. It's not an eternal affliction that you're facing right now. Run to Jesus. Run to the cross. Trust in him for hope. And your affliction you're experiencing now will pass away eventually. And you'll look back on it in all eternity and say, wow, that was slight and momentary. And look at the weight of this glory. The scales have gone to the weight of glory. And this affliction, it was so light in comparison. So I'm praying for you today. I'm praying that you will find hope in the words of God as we together fight against fear and anxiety, and do not lose heart.